Hey everyone, this is Brian here from Massey's Main Entertainment. We're back again this week with our continuing series of doing the top 5 movies for each particular year, ranging from 1965 all the way to 1979. We had some really great success with the 1965 and 66 videos. Tough years for movies, but we came up with some really great stuff. Joined again this week with my buddies and film enthusiasts, Doc, who just got back from a big dinner, evidently, that he was going to order $85 steak and never sent me a picture of it. I was really upset about it. And my buddy Rich out in Philadelphia. And Randy's joining us from the Midwest area there. So, guys, what did you think? Has it gotten a little bit better for us now that we're in 1967, a little bit more to choose from?
Absolutely.
Oh, I would say, yeah, way more to choose from. This was the hardest year so far out of the gate for us. I think 65 and 66 were good years and stuff, but this is up a level here in my eyes, and narrowing down to 5. Personal preference here, and some things you're going to float back to in your life. You know, I wasn't even born at this time, and I love these movies. So,
absolutely,
yeah, really tough to narrow it down to 5, but great choices across the board, I think.
Yeah, what do you think, Rich?
I think it's a real strong year. I think it's the best year of the decade of the 60s, most likely. The ones that we're going to do anyway, for sure. And a lot of groundbreaking movies and heavyweight, pieces of cinema. What can I say? They're strong.
Yep. Randy, you agree?
Yeah, I think that for me, there was like 3 all-time classics in this year. And Hollywood was changing, and I think some of these films caused it to change.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I gotta agree with all of you guys. I felt like I could immediately write down 3 movies right off the bat when we did this year, and then the other 2, one of them was kind of a recent preference, and then that 5th spot I kind of bounced around a little bit, but finally settled on my original choice. So it's I think it's a much better year, and Rich may be right. It may be the best year of the 60s. So, but anyway, our order today is going to be, Rich, since you went last, you got to flip all the way and start us off this time, and then I'll follow you. Doc, you'll follow me, and Randy, you get to do the cleanup, and you're the man with all the information anyway, Randy. So we'll just kind of hold back, let you throw that stuff out there, and, you can be the man today.
All right.
All right, Rich, what do you got?
Well,
Number 5.
We were talking a little bit off camera about how solid the year was, and I came down to 8 films that had to squeeze into 5 spots. So I'm going to leave some really, really strong movies out. But my number 5 is just a personal choice. I don't expect anybody else to have it, but I love teacher movies. So this is To Sir with Love, starring Sidney Poitier and London. He's brought in a first-time teacher, and he gets this crew of incorrigibles, people that have been thrown out of other schools, just pushing their way through. They don't give a crap about school. They torment him. There's a lot of, class structure stuff. They come from poor families or dysfunctional families, and they're not the least bit interested in school. They're just looking to get out. So great performance, real classy performance by Sidney Poitier, trying to teach them how to be young men and young women and have some discipline in their lives. Really a good teacher-student movie, and I'm partial to those. Of course, it has the number 1 song, To Sir with Love, done by Lulu, went to the top of the charts. But I've always liked the movie, and if it comes back on, I'll watch it. I have a sentimental spot for it. So that's why I squoze it in at number 5.
Nice.
Very good
choice. For me, number 5, I think we're gonna stick with Sidney Poitier here. I'm gonna go within the Heat of the Night. This was the one that that I kind of bounced around a little bit whether or not I was going to keep it in there. But when I watched it again, I thought it was such a powerful movie to kind of, again, like last week, I kind of spoke to how I really enjoyed the fact that he was doing a lot of movies that was kind of pushing that boundaries of addressing racism and the culture of the Deep South at the time. And I thought his performance as Virgil Tibbs was fantastic. Rod Steiger's in the movie as well as the law officer who, seems to warm up to Virgil as things move forward. But, Virgil at first is considered like a prime suspect in the murder of this businessman who had moved to town to open up a large corporation, and then is told by his sergeant that he just might as well just stay down there and assist with the investigation. Of course, he's met with, racism and hatred at every corner, almost threats on his life, actual being in mortal danger, all sorts of situations, and overcoming those things and earning the respect of some of the people, particularly Rod Steiger's character. I just thought it's just a really good, powerful movie that I feel like I can watch over and over. So I wanted to include it. So that's my number 5.
Excellent.
Good pick. So I'm up next, right? Now my number 5. I lean more towards Rich's way of going things here. Just a personal favorite for me as well. So Wait Until Dark is going to be my number 5. We've talked about Hitchcockish movies in the past and stuff like this, and I find this to be in the same vein as that kind of movie. And it's not a Hitchcock movie. It has a lot of Hitchcock elements, even that we see later on that Hitchcock uses in movies and stuff. Audrey Hepburn, Jack Weston, Richard Crenna, a really creepy Alan Arkin. This is the drugs. It's just she's blind, Audrey's blind, and there's looking for the drugs and the story behind it, and backstabbing between thieves and everything else, and it's just a really good, thriller kind of story with great acting. And it's shot really well. It's almost got like that play vibe to it in a lot of senses. It's a lot takes place in just her apartment. So my kind of movie, man. Wait Until Dark is my number 5 for 67.
Good one.
Very good choice. That's kind of coming from a different angle. I like that, Doc. Good pick.
Thanks, man.
All right. I had 4 movies that were sure in, and it was like the 5th one was the one I kept going around and around. What was I going to pick? I actually picked the last movie I watched, so maybe it was recent bias, but I'm picking Belle de Jour by Louis Buñuel. Somewhat of a study in eroticism, but it's more of a case study of this young wife played by Catherine Deneuve. It's hinted at that she had some sexual abuse when she was younger, and it's kind of made her this cold, virtuous woman, afraid of sex with her husband. But she has these wild, masochistic fantasies. And in a way, to satisfy these fantasies, she starts working at this fancy brothel in the afternoons. And it's like she's reenacting these dreams. And everything is shot so beautifully. I mean, the photography on this is just amazing. It's so colorful that it's almost like it's not real. And the clients are just kind of like toys to further these fantasies. And later on, a couple of gangsters visit the brothel, and one of them falls for her, which leads to this wild climax. I won't go into that. And then it has the final shot, which kind of like 2001 and what's the other movie that we talked about recently? The final shot. I can't think of it. What I was thinking of now. But anyway, I don't think I figured out the final shot in this movie, but it's still a fascinating film. Buñuel is known as the father of surrealism, and to me, it's just a great movie that I haven't figured out the ending exactly.
The other movie was Blow Up.
Blow Up,
yeah.
Or
for me, it was called Blowout.
Blowout.
I stumbled over that too. So.
All right, nice choice. Let's get to number 4 then. Rich, what do you got there?
Number 4, I've got In Cold Blood.
Ooh.
From the novel, the Truman Capote novel. This is sort of a
nice
docudrama. It's shot in black and white, based on a real incident where the Clutter family were murdered by these 2 losers, basically played by Robert Blake and Scott Wilson, and great performances, very realistic. I mean, it's cringeworthy and very graphic for the time that when they went in and killed these people. Disturbing, senseless. I just love the way the whole thing. It's directed by Richard Brooks, who did The Professionals that you guys had on in the last segment. So a named director. fantastic job. Probably Robert Blake and Scott Wilson's best performances. I mean, they're not big name actors, but they really are effective here as Perry and Dick, the two murderers. And years later, of course, there was a Capote movie starring Philip Seymour Hoffman, and it delves into some of the reasoning behind how they ended up the way they did. But solid movie, and it makes my list here at number 4.
Nice. All right. For me, number 4 kind of was one of the ones was one of the 3 that I wrote down originally. I'm going with Mike Nichols, and one word, gentlemen, plastics. And I'm gonna go with The Graduate here. I think I really like this movie. It just wasn't as powerful as the 3 I have ahead of it. Any other year, maybe this movie might have been number 1 on my list. It's everybody knows the story as Benjamin Braddock is graduating school, kind of looking for his place in life, and he ends up having an affair with this Mrs. Robinson, played by Anne Bancroft, who was just absolutely smoking in this movie, and about eventually falling in love with the daughter Elaine, and having a fight for the right for her love. I think my favorite scene in the movie remains to this day is that them running away together at the end. If anybody hasn't seen The Graduate, I hope I'm not spoiling anything. It's crazy. But them running away at the end, and they're getting on the bus, and they're playing Sound of Silence, from Simon and Garfunkel, and just how the expression on their face slowly changes from this absolute joy to horror, just not knowing what the future actually holds for them. And it's a subtle thing, but it's just a powerful thing that I thought really kind of personified the movie and that angst feeling you have of trying to go out in life and make something of yourself and make a life with somebody. I thought it was really great. So I put The Graduate here at number 4. So
very good. My number 4, it's of my whole list. I'll say my number 4 is probably my most rewatchable movie. So it'll give you an idea that I'm putting movies that I think are better ahead of what I think is more watchable. But just for me, man, I got The Dirty Dozen at number 4 for me. I've watched this my whole life, so it's one of these kind of movies, man. I can watch this at any time. It's one of those ones that it doesn't matter what time it comes on. If I'm picking it up in the middle, I'll just watch it. If I'm right at the beginning, I'll watch it. And if I've got the last scene and Jim Brown is running around at the top of a chalet dropping bombs down some fence, man, I'm watching that part too. So, when you watch the movie again, or if you go back and watch this movie again, if you haven't seen it, and when you see it for the first time possibly, then you'll understand that Lee Marvin is fantastic in this movie, man. I don't think anybody else could play this part like him. There's other people that can play the part, but Lee Marvin was almost meant to play this. As much as he didn't like the role, he's fantastic in the role. So, John Cassavetes is fantastic as Franco. I mean, just it's a great cast here. You got Telly Savalas, I mentioned John. You get the Donald Sutherland, Charles Bronson. It's like there's Borgnine in it. Just a bunch of guys that have no real choice in their life and what they're going to do, more or less, on go and take the Nazis and get a chance to avoid the death penalty or lifelong sentences and stuff like that during the war. So it's a war setting. It's got very comedic parts to it, and when they are comedic parts, they're very friggin' funny, man. But it's got both sides of that movie. And when there's the war stuff happening, the war stuff is very well done as well. So not really the war part, but you can understand what's going on in the movie when you watch it. So it's got a lot of sides to it. Hard asses, built around teamwork and delinquents across the board. So yeah, Dirty Dozen's kind of like a classic for me in the genre.
Absolutely.
Nice. It sticks with your genre. You love that. You love them.
Totally.
You love them, Doc. So yeah, perfect.
Thank you,
Randy.
All right, my number 4 is Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman, directed by Stuart Rosenberg, who was basically a TV director at that time, and beautifully photographed by Conrad Hall, who did The Professionals that we talked about last time. And he was actually married to one of the actresses in a movie I've got further up in this list. at one time. And Paul Newman's this prisoner who's a nonconformist, kind of becomes a hero to the other prisoners because of this, and kind of makes the intolerable tolerable for these other inmates. George Kennedy's the one that he got an Academy Award for this. He's one that kind of controls the gang, and he calls Newman a world shaker. And although Newman did not want this, he didn't want this hero status. In fact, after one of his escapes, he comes in all beat up, and he tells them to quit living their lives through him. But and of course, George Kennedy says, "Oh, he's just in bad shape or whatever." But in the end, he kind of becomes a folk hero, even though that's maybe not what he wanted to be. But there's so many great scenes in this. There's the car wash scene that everybody remembers, the egg eating scene,
Yeah.
the sweet scene he has with Joe Van Fleet as his mother. But and it has some great characters like the guy they call No Eyes, Morgan Woodward, who I guess originally he had some lines, but the director didn't think they fit the tough image that he had, so he cut out all lines altogether. And of course, Strother Martin has the most famous line, one of the most famous lines in movie history.
Right.
So Cool Hand Luke, my number 4.
Very good.
Nice. Yep. Great choice.
All right. I'm going to piggyback on that. That's my number 3, Cool Hand Luke.
Nice.
One of the great Paul Newman performances. You mentioned George Kennedy and Strother Martin. Strother Martin, everything he's in, he adds a little spice to it. So he's one of them great character actors. Failure to communicate, of course, is the line. And I love prison movies in general, and this is top echelon. That chain gang, Randy mentioned the cinematography. You can actually feel the heat and the sweat on these guys. I mean, the imagery is fantastic. It takes you to a place in time. You feel like you're out there with the guys sweating. And the car wash scene is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, of course. The egg scene is runner-up. That anti-authority vibe you get through the whole movie. It's perfect for the late 60s because people were starting to reject what was going on in their, the predecessors, and they didn't want to be like their parents. They wanted to break some rules and that type of thing. So this is one of the great movies. So Cool Hand Luke, it might be in my top 5 Paul Newman movies of all time. Probably is.
Perfect. I guess we're going to just go for 3 in a row here because my number 3 is Cool Hand Luke. I don't want to talk about too much more than you did. I thought what was really kind of interesting his attitude against disestablishment. I thought was, because of the religious imagery that was in it, I thought it was almost as much a defiance of God as it was a defiance of the government and establishment and the rules. Even that scene in the church where he's kind of at, yelling at God, basically saying he never really got a break in life, and he's just blaming God for that situation. I guess a lot of that conversation that he has there was a parallel from the Gospel of Luke. There's even some imagery within, the cinematography, some imagery within there, religious imagery when he's lying on the table after, trying to eat the eggs. Almost looks like a crucifixion type, situation that he's lying on the table, and then a scene where they're panning back when on his last escape, and almost creates a cross, and the visual shot. I thought that was really great for filmmaking. Just an all around good movie. It would probably make my top 5 for Paul Newman as well. So I'm putting Cool Hand Luke at 3 here. So
nice.
Doc,
what do you think?
I'm going to buck the trend, I guess. I'm going to stop the train right there, man. So that's what I'm going to do. So, my number 3 is Bonnie and Clyde. That's where I'm going. So, we talked about, a lot of groundbreaking stuff happens in film as we move along here in the 60s and stuff. And this is, I'd put this in the category of, shall we say, bucking the trend, I guess, to carry on with what Brian just touched on there in the movie. But in this movie, it's bucking the trend as well. This is very violent, this movie, Bonnie and Clyde. This shows a lot of different sides. It's, got a little sensual side with Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty being the on-the-run criminal kind of guy or whatever. Just it's You know, depending on how old you are watching this video, it's the real Natural Born Killers, the first one. It's it's crazy. It's a crazy movie, violent as hell. You know, Gene Wilder shows up. There's Gene Hackman's very good in this movie as his brother as well. So, but the script is really good, and the acting is really fantastic when you get right down to how they actually do this movie. It's shot really well. The scenes are pretty vast and dramatic in some spots, right? So they carry on. The shots are a little longer than, let's say, normal shots sometimes too, which adds to the movie, and I like that part of the filmmaking part. So, Bonnie and Clyde, that'll be my number 3 for 67, man.
Nice choice.
Those robbers going crazy, man. Those robbers going crazy.
That's right. Randy.
Like my top 3, I went back and forth of what I was going to have in what order. This one ended up number 3. And of course, by now you know that I enjoy Jean-Pierre Melville, and I think this movie is his masterpiece. It's called Le Samouraï. I love this film. It just oozes style. In fact, it's 10 minutes into the movie before anybody even says a line, which for me is great in a foreign film, because that way you don't have to look at the subject and figure out. For me, a lot of times foreign films, it's easier for me to have it on DVD so I can stop and read the subtitles so I can see their reaction too, because that's one of the tough things about it. But it's one of the things is Alain Delon is this hitman, and he has so much style. And I think the Coen brothers were watching this movie because all the things with the hats in Miller's Crossing, and he does the exact same thing like Gabriel Byrne. Of course, this was done before Miller's Crossing, where he puts on his hat and then he does this little thing with when he's putting it on. But he's a hitman. He does this hit. It goes not exactly perfectly, but he thinks he's got away with it. But there's a police detective that, even though he's got a great alibi, that's just on his case, believes that he did it. And then the people that hired him are suddenly thinking, if he gets, maybe we should get rid of him, even though we hired him. And so he's got all this going on. And it's kind of like, at the end, it's kind of like this ritual of the Japanese samurai that's a big part of the movie, which is where they get the title from. But for me, it's a flawless film, and it's one of my favorites.
That's a fantastic choice. Great choice.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I have to confess, I've never seen it, so I can't comment one way or the other. But I have to catch up on that. I know it's on HBO Max.
It's on Max.
Yeah, I've seen it in the listing, so I have to catch up and take a couple hours and watch it. My number 2 is Bonnie and Clyde. Doc had it earlier, directed by Arthur Penn. Fantastic movie, and it definitely opened the door for the way violence is shown in motion pictures. I mean, graphic, in your face, realistic, gruesome at times. The movies before that were just sort of cookie cutter, and we'll show you a spot of blood here and there. This one's really pretty intense, along with the storytelling of the Bonnie and Clyde, 2 real figures in the Great Depression there. And that's done well, too. It's a period piece. You could argue that it glamorizes criminals to a degree, but it still makes for fantastic storytelling and great directing. So, and all 5 of the principal actors here were nominated for Oscars. Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway in the lead roles, and you got Gene Hackman, Estelle Parsons, and Michael J. Pollard in the supporting roles. So all 5, you have 5 nominees, plus the director and the picture and the screenplay. Massive hit, and it still holds up today. I think it's definitely a solid 1967 movie. It breaks in at number 2.
Very good. Nice. So for me, number 2, I'm going to be echoing Randy here. This is a movie, Randy, you turned me on to when we had a conversation about it before, and I absolutely love the movie. I paid particular attention when you had told me before about the 10. It felt longer than 10 minutes. It felt like 10 to 15 minutes where there wasn't any conversation going. You described the movie already. I noticed that he was actually married to Natalie Delon was also in the movie, and they were both married for a short period of time. and it was also during when this movie actually came out. It was released in the U.S. under the name Godson because they were trying to kind of piggyback off of the Godfather imagery, image and everything, which I thought, that really didn't fit well. I noticed elements in the movie that I thought Luc Besson probably watched to do Leon, the professional, and I thought maybe Brian De Palma probably watched to do The Untouchables. There's little elements like that you see in the film where you know that another director grabbed it from it and for inspiration to do their films. So I thought this is a great movie. I love it, but as a film minor student, that I just think it was so well done, and I got it here at number 2 for me. So
Very good.
Doc, what do you think?
Well, my number 2 is one that we've heard now, so I might have bucked the trend last time, but I had Cool Hand Luke up a spot from where you guys previously had it, be it where it was. You guys touched on it all, man. The eggs, the car washing, failure to communicate, and an iconic fight scene with George Kennedy as well. Cinematography, the rebel attitude of everything else. Obviously, like Spielberg and George Lucas and everything were enamored visually on how this movie looked, because sunsets are prominent in a lot of their movies and how they shoot things. You think of Raiders or Empire of the Sun or something from Spielberg, or Star Wars even from Lucas. You can see how it's shot really well, man. This is I like prison movies as well, Rich, a lot, and this is right up there with me. And I think, you guys probably all know I'm a big Paul Newman guy anyway, so it was tough for me not to have it at number 1, to be honest with you. So that Luke's a classic, man, and top tier movie in '67 in my eyes, man.
There you go.
All right.
It made it though. It made it.
Yeah, for sure. It bantered back and forth between 1 and 2 for a while.
Randy, what's your number 2?
Well, my number 2 is going to be Bonnie and Clyde, Arthur Penn. Rich touched on, how it changed, how violence was shown, and kind of, I think it borrowed some from the French New Wave, maybe movies like Breathless, that kind of pushed the boundaries of traditional Hollywood films. And when this came out, it wasn't really that well reviewed, except for Roger Ebert was one of the champions for it. And over time, the critics have kind of changed their mind on it and reevaluated this movie. But this is an amazing movie. One thing I thought was interesting is Gene Hackman got fired from my number 1 movie and then got this role, which was kind of interesting. And it's just a great film with a sober ending, much like La Samurai is ending.
That's right. All right, we're all the way. We made it, guys.
We made it. Here we go.
I'm really interested now because I'm like looking at what you guys have 2 through 5. I'm like, all right, I got to hear what number 1 is from you guys. Rich, come on.
Number 1 was an easy one for me. It was The Graduate for sure. I mean, that's stuck with me since the first time I saw it. Directed by Mike Nichols, starring Dustin Hoffman. You went over it earlier. Anne Bancroft, and of course Catherine Ross as the daughter, who he eventually is smitten with, and it's just a coming of age, generational gap kind of movie where he's in that transition period of just getting out of college, trying to find his way. He gets involved in an affair with his parents' friend's wife or whatever, played Mrs. Robinson. I love the Simon and Garfunkel soundtrack. It adds so much to this movie. A stroke of genius. Benjamin Braddock and Mrs. Robinson are basically just using each other for sex. She's cheating on her husband. He's trying to explore and maybe learn some things along the way. He's a virgin, that type of thing. And, and then when Catherine Ross comes, maybe he's ready for it. Who knows? But anyway, a walk-in part of Richard Dreyfuss shows up briefly in this movie in the dorm scene. And the guy that played on Three's Company, what's his name? Norman Fell. He's the
landlord.
Yeah, just a great movie. I love the ending scene too, with what Brian mentioned, where they're euphoric, they're getting away and this and that, and then all of a sudden the faces
This is face change.
realize what's next and where do we go from here, and maybe it's not all what it's cracked up to be. Do I really love her, or is it just one of these things where I'm getting over on Mrs. Rob? Who knows? But a great ending, great cast. Dustin Hoffman's career was built off of this film, so that's my number one.
Okay, number one for me, and the only reason that now that we can go back and Graduate was at number 4 for me was the fact that Richard Dreyfuss showed up in The Graduate. That just dragged it down to number 4 for me. Just couldn't keep it high anymore. Just couldn't do it. Couldn't do it in my heart. My number one is Bonnie and Clyde. I think it's that great neo-noir crime film that kind of changed cinema altogether, and that what they were willing to actually show and film, and film, like sex and violence. And Doc kind of touched upon it a little bit, in which it's not. They didn't have these scenes where, like, oh, they got shot, and then you cut away, and there's a police detective standing over a dead body, and he's describing something. It's like they had these long, violent shots that just, you felt like they were going almost too far, but that was kind of the point of it. I love it because, the Bonnie and Clyde kind of typified that counter culture that was going on at the time. Considered anti-heroes in a lot of ways, because people were kind of rooting for them because they felt like, they were robbing banks. They were kind of sticking it to the man a little bit. And so I think even though that the original Barrow lady who actually this is based on Estelle Parsons' role in the film is just absolutely incredible. She won Best Supporting Actress, didn't she? I mean, I believe. If we go back and look, I believe she won. I mean, I know the original person complained that she goes, I didn't yell and screech like that. That's just too over the top. But I thought it was a great performance anyway. So Bonnie and Clyde's my number one.
Nice.
Very good. You guys are probably going to be, pissed off if you want the truth there, because my number one is probably not what you guys saw coming. I'm guessing no. So my number one is In the Heat of the Night. That's my number one. I think, Brian, you had it earlier on your list, and if I was to pick up off anything out of this, man, this is, to me, it's top tier acting, and this is probably the best performances of the year, and with a fantastic story. It's got racial undertones and racial things happening, especially at this time and thing. Shown in film like this, Sidney Poitier is fantastic. Rod Steiger is awesome, man, in this movie. And we can touch on why maybe something didn't make my list later on. But to me, this is a story that has two stories in it. And as those two stories morph together towards the end, especially in the third act, it becomes really a different vibe for the whole movie. I think it's so well made. Look, this got all the accolades in '67, and to be honest with you, I understand why. I think this is kind of like a masterpiece out of the '60s, if you want the truth. It's a great movie. I went back and watched this twice. I was so enamored with it. So, and when I did that, it took Cool Hand out for number 2 and did something special in my eyes. And I think this is it.
So, Doc, you picked it as your number one because Richard Dreyfuss wasn't in it, right?
Richard, you have more influence on me than you think you actually do, buddy. Because the producers would, The Graduate would probably be like number 7 for me on my list, and that's the truth.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good film. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Randy.
Well, I'm gonna have to go with Rich, and I'm picking The Graduate as my number one. Mike Nichols. He came from a stage background, and his first success was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
That's right.
And this is kind of a movie about the student's alienation from the adult world. He's kind of in this limbo period after he gets out of college to go to the workforce, to join the working world. And he's kind of suffocating with all these suggestions he's getting, all this advice like plastics. And the movie kind of has this kind of European feel sometimes. And even though he came from this theater background, Mike Nichols wanted to experiment with all these different shots. He does the famous one between the legs of Bancroft, and then he does one where he's shooting through the goggles of Dustin Hoffman's scuba outfit when he jumps in the thing.
Under the water.
Yeah, into the water. And then, like Rich said, the Simon and Garfunkel music just sets this kind of tone of melancholy sometimes. But his discomfort and morosis help to make the humor. Like when he's trying to get a room, and he's dealing with what's his name, the guy that wrote the movie, Orson Bean. Orson Bean, is that right?
No, Buck Henry.
Buck Henry.
Oh, Buck Henry is the guy behind it.
Buck Henry pops up and he hits the bell, and then Dustin Hoffman puts his hand there, and then he gets his hand in. And he's got luggage. It's his toothbrush, and I don't know, it just cracked me up. And it was the role Gene Hackman lost was the Murray Hamilton role in the movie, and Catherine Ross ended up marrying Conrad Hall, the cinematographer for The Professionals and Cool Hand Luke. But yeah, I just love this movie, and actually the ending scene. I don't think it was Mike Nichols that was in there. It was another person that was doing the camera work for the ending scene, and he kept the camera on them and where he wasn't really supposed to. And Mike Nichols loved it because they were wondering what do they do, and that's kind of what in reality would be like.
Right.
Yeah, Graduate was my number one.
That's great. All right. Yeah, I really like doing this one. I thought, I think we talked beforehand that we thought we were going to have 3 alike, and we all felt pretty confident about that. We only had 2 alike with all of us, and some of us had, some of us matched individually. Like I matched with Doc on one, and matched with Randy on one. You guys may have crisscrossed a little bit too, but overall, only 2. I was really surprised about that. I think that's great.
Well, the hardest cut for me was In the Heat of the Night. I wanted to get it in there, but I wanted a personal favorite as well. So Dirty Dozen, of course, could be on any list. It's a pretty darn good year. Point Blank's another good movie. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner got no love from any of us.
Yep.
Sidney Poitier had 3 movies that year, man. 3.
Right.
In the Heat of the Night, To Sir with Love, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah,
so that's what we got.
That's what we got. The other one that I would mention there anyway, Brian, was like Hombre was really close for me as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a really underrated movie. The producer Mel Brooks too. It's pretty funny for what it is.
Rich, you got the best picture information handy?
Well, yeah, In the Heat of the Night won, but the nominees were Bonnie and Clyde, The Graduate, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and believe it or not, Dr. Dolittle got a nomination for Best Picture. I don't know how that happened when you had all these other classics, but it's the way it goes sometimes. And you could argue In the Heat of the Night deserved it for the content and that type of thing, but Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate were right there with it. It must have been a close race.
Right.
Yeah, good.
That's what we got. That's what we got for this week for 1967. I'm really glad that everybody joined us. Doc, I really appreciate you coming. Randy, Rich, please like, sub, and comment down below. Particularly, I want to see some top 5s out there because I always see some movies, usually in those that I haven't never seen before, and that I added to a list so that I have an opportunity to go watch those movies as well. Because I like challenging myself and picking up something maybe that I would have just overlooked completely back in the younger days. So we really appreciate everybody watching, and we'll catch you guys for 1968 next week. So take care. Bye-bye.
Later.
Ciao.